Welcome to the GreenPilled Network podcast. If you're just joining us, we're building a coordination, a network society of thousands of hackers, dreamers, and doers using crypto to bring positive sum digital systems to the world. This podcast features the people who are doing it, and we publish a season of a dozen episodes or so every couple months. This season is about lean, mean capital allocation machines. Capital allocation is the process of deciding how to invest or spend financial resources. With Web3, we can build on-chain capital allocation and build more scalable, precise, less intermediaries in our capital allocation. And I'm just excited about finding the most cool experiments in capital allocation that can help these DAOs that have tens of millions of dollars in their treasury allocate capital to fund what matters. One special thing we're doing this season is allowing you to collect this episode. All episodes during this season are available on chain. Go to pods.media/greenpill if you're interested in collecting. Thank you to JTNickel.eth, Hal.eth, Simons SD, 0x Lucas, SkyDAO, Sean W. Brand.eth, James.eth, and MMAonchain.eth for collecting the Greenpill episodes. If you collect the episode, then I may give you a shout out on a podcast episode in the future. If you want to learn more about Greenpill, you can visit our website at greenpill.network, where you can download the Greenpill book for free, join the Discord, or become a member of your greenpill.network chapter. My guest today is Zach, the co-founder of Coordinape. Coordinape is building the future of work and future of impact on chain. Basically, their primary product is gift circles, a product that allows you and your team members to give each other give tokens as tokens of appreciation for work that have been done in a DAO or any context in which you're working with a group. And I'm really excited about Coordinape because it allows people to peer-to-peer allocate gratitude, allocate social connections, and allocate capital to each other, as opposed to the old corporate world where we used to just go to our bosses to get our performance reviews. Coordinape is kind of like a peer review system for you and your contributors. So you can see where the trust is happening within your teams without having to have a boss. And, within the context of capital allocation, I think that projects like Protocol Guild and Coordinape are basically starting with like a registry of humans and setting weights to them, helping create bottoms up local representations of how different teams are working and what the inner workings are, from which you can then drop capital on top of. So two different categories of capital allocation. One starts with the pool of capital and tries to figure out who to allocate it to, and then systems like Coordinape and Protocol Guild start with a registry and work backwards from the people, and maybe those things will meet in the middle. So Zach has been a friend for a long time. I think he's one of the smartest and just well-meaning people in the space who are thinking about capital allocation, who are thinking about DAO coordination, and Coordinape is used by tens of DAOs that, and I think it's really successful in creating this on-chain culture of capital allocation and building trust and positive sum relationships between the people who are doing it. And that's what Greenpill is all about. So I think you're going to enjoy this episode about Coordinape. What's up, Zach?
Hey, Kevin, how are you doing?
Chilling. I'm excited to talk about Coordinape, Colinks, all the things you've been up to. Where should we start?
Coordinape is a great place to start if we're talking about capital allocation.
Yep.
I can share with everybody just the basics of how Coordinape works. Essentially, any collaborators or teammates, you're part of a circle together. You're working on a project, whether it's sort of a one-off thing or an ongoing project, and at intervals that we call epochs, you give to each other. And those give are essentially points that can represent some budget of tokens that you're trying to distribute, but they also, in of themselves, have value as reputation. What we've seen is it's really a way for teams not only to distribute resources to each other, but also distribute reputation. And then I think often overlooked, but most critically, it's a way to really support and enhance team culture, because it elicits really important conversations around well, what is valuable and what do meaningful contributions on this team or this project actually look like? Um, who is providing value? What does that mean? So yeah, that's basically how it works.
So as I understand it, basically, if I'm on a team that uses Coordinape, could be a DAO, but doesn't have to be.
Hmm.
Every epoch, which could be a week or a month or a quarter, we go in and we allocate give to each other. And the end result is that you can kind of see who of your peers thinks that you're doing a good job or has gifted you give, which is a proxy for where the relationships of trust and value occurring in an organization. And uh, as opposed to traditional capital allocation, where it's like the boss who decides how everyone is doing, maybe with the consultation of your peers. In a Coordinape circle, it's actually the peers who are directly peer to peer giving give tokens, which can be a proxy for social capital, but also you could do like a token airdrop on top of that. Is that too reductionist? Is that close at all?
No, that's super close. Um, I'd say the important nuance there is that we've really built Coordinate around focusing on the positive, around like appreciation and gratitude. So um, this can be a fine line that can go down the road of like stack ranking. That's not what we're saying, like who did the, who's best, who's number two, number three, etc. But just noticing those places where people really, really performed and appreciating them for it. And so it becomes kind of a tool to just hone the collective intelligence of the team to make visible what a lot of people just intuited, right? And it's also a way, I'd say there's a big difference between, you know, like you said, either a boss can decide who gets paid what, or we make a bunch of arrangements beforehand, and oh, I'm going to do this for this much money. But this takes more of like a retroactive, you know, public goods funding approach where it's like, well, let's see the contributions people actually made, because we've
Mhm.
all had that experience in a team where someone, maybe someone unexpected, but certainly someone like stepped up and really delivered and carried the day. And maybe someone, again, unexpected or didn't, and for whatever reasons, like um, didn't carry things the way that you thought they might. And so this is a way to sort of true up your actual experience, instead of having a bunch of preset agreements. You can have the allocation reflect sort of what really happened. And I'd say that's the big sort of North Star idea behind Coordinate is value in equals value out, and we'll never perfect that ideal, but like how can we get closer to that?
Yeah, and before we were recording, we were talking about the eight forms of capital. Basically, this idea that capital isn't just financial capital, but it can be intellectual, spiritual, experiential, social capital.
Hmm.
And I think that you were saying that it's about more than just financial capital when you're voting. It's more about like the social capital that you or other different types of capital that are not obviously monetary.
100%. I mean, we hear this from users all the time that it's like the notes that they get from people. So when you allocate give, you also can send a note, and there's people that have framed the notes that they got from people. I think especially in our industry when we're all working remote, we're working alone. Sometimes we're even in like anonymous or pseudonymous teams, and just getting that direct appreciation of like, hey, these things you did really had an impact on me. I really appreciate it. I see the effort you're putting in. We don't have as many chances for that. Very few people have managers that are doing monthly reviews and things like that. And so getting that feedback is really crucial. We also have what we call co-sols, which are soul-bound tokens that you can mint, and that takes your give on chain. So you can take that social capital, and it doesn't just live, within the team you are working in, but you can actually have it on chain, so that people that you're working with can look and say like, oh yeah, not only did they say, oh, I was a Gitcoin contributor, like I can see the three circles you were in at Gitcoin. I can see like the value that your colleagues attributed. So you can take that social capital and start to use it, for your reputation on chain.
I'd love to touch on the origin story of Coordinate next. I think y'all were prototyped and built within the Yearn ecosystem, which I understand was a primordial soup of DAO Genesis story, and I've always been sort of in awe of the Yearn Genesis story, because it seems like everyone came in on equal footing, and it was sort of like a Hobbesian, like you had to figure out how to coordinate. Whereas Gitcoin, my experience with a DAO is that it was a company and we had to put it on chain and then progressively decentralize it. So the starting conditions are very different for the DAO that you have experience in versus ours. But yeah, maybe say a little bit about Yearn and how Coordinape started.
Yeah. So I also came into Yearn after it was sort of well underway.
Mm,
Um, I, I was more interested in, I got interested in DAOs just from a coordination perspective, because of the work I was doing before around impact networks and how do you catalyze diverse stakeholders to make social and environmental impact. That's kind of where my focus was. And then when I discovered DAOs, it's just like, oh man, this is like global peer-to-peer coordination infrastructure. Like this is amazing. This is actually kind of like a little bit of a full circle moment too, because the one of the first podcasts I heard was you and Amin talking about playing Moloch, and hearing that like
yeah,
really
that
dove
was a
me down the
classic
rabbit
one.
hole. Yeah, it
Yeah.
really was. I mean, that was the first time I really heard the Moloch meme, and I was just like, holy shit, I got to get involved with this nonsense.
We'll have a
And
link to that
so,
in the show notes for the listeners. It's an episode with Amin Soleimani, myself, and David Hoffman on Bankless. So
right,
check out the show notes if you're interested in checking that out.
right. 2 years ago, I heard a podcast with you two, and now I'm knife fighting with Amin in Denver, and I'm on a podcast with you. So you never know
Yeah.
how your life can change. Um, Uh, so anyway, I knew Trake from a previous life and started getting involved
Yeah.
with Yearn mostly on
Trake was your Coordinape co-founder.
right. Thank
Yeah.
you, Tracheopteryx. Tracheopteryx was a co-founder who has also helped design a lot of the governance at Yearn. And so started working on the Bluepill, which I hope we'll put that in the show notes also, and just doing various coordination stuff within Yearn. And one of the challenges that they were having is they had a bunch of contributors doing all this cool stuff, um, and they had a grants committee, but basically like some people would apply for grants and didn't deserve them, and some people who really deserved them wouldn't even apply. And the grants committee is like, look, we were just like here. We didn't want to be on the grants committee. How do you decide who's on the grants committee? We need a permissionless way to sort of be assigning value. Um, and it converged the way that we built that company. We built it as a network, so we didn't have anyone on payroll. We would just basically do a project and then invoice a client and have a conversation about who should get what. And so we kind of used that as inspiration and said, what if people just allocated to those who they saw doing amazing stuff in the ecosystem? And so we sort of found a few engineers that had some extra time at Yearn and put together a prototype, and we had our first circle with people, just giving and appreciating, allocating, and they really, loved it. It was a lot of fun for them to do. And so then we had sushi at the time was a burgeoning DAO who heard about this and also wanted to try it, and it just kind of spread from there with DAOs wanting to do this capital allocation that didn't rely on a centralized node, but rather just listening to the collective intelligence of the community.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's very elegant to hear what your peers think and to base your compensation off of who thinks you're providing value. But also, having been involved in these political economies in the past, I'm imagining that there's politics or drama or something that it just kind of brings to the forefront. And in some ways
Mm-hmm.
that's a feature. You don't want, like, back channely, backstabby type cultures, but also, it's emotionally exhaustive to have, oh wait, this person didn't vote for me at all. Well, like, what's up with that coming up on a regular basis. I don't know if that's something that you want to talk about or if you have any anecdotes to share, but that feels like it would be a challenge if you're constantly on a regular interval having to tell your peers uh, what you think, and allocate scarce give tokens to them.
I mean, definitely, it's hard. I would say like one of the challenges that Coordinate presents is it's like, okay, in in a lot of teams, there is no HR, right? But that means that it's everybody's job
Mm-hmm.
to sort of be giving feedback and to
Yeah.
yeah, doing all these things. And there is like, of course, there's all sorts of like, well, they gave some to me. Does that mean I have to give to them? Oh, I don't know. They gave me too much, or I don't really want to give to, yeah, all of these considerations. Oh, wow, everyone else gave to Kevin. Do I have to give to Kevin? I didn't even work with him this time. Um,
Mm.
like all of those sorts of considerations. And I would say that what we've found is what's most important is when people just get started using Coordinape, to really just have the framing very clear, right? And to set some norms in advance. So if you permission people and say like, hey, look, here's how we're going to do this, right? Only allocate to those people who you've collaborated with directly, and you sort of normalize zero give,
Mm-hmm.
as like, this is not personal. We're only allocating to those people who we directly collaborated with, as an example. Then people are like, oh, okay, this is now the challenges really come when it's when you get in the ambiguity of like people don't know what the norms or the rules are yet. So
Mm-hmm.
we just encourage people, and we help people sort of set up what are those cultural norms that you want to have for your Coordinape circle, and then once people know and understand those, they catch on really quick. And then the other thing that I think is interesting is that, um, we know from both our own experience, but tons of organizational development research as well, is that like conflict is really like one of the best indicators of the health and success of a team. How they deal with conflict, how they enter into conflict. And so, we definitely saw cases where Coordinape would bring to light, a lot of interpersonal conflicts within a team,
Mm-hmm.
and they'd be like, "Oh, this tool, like this isn't the right tool for us."
Yeah.
But all the conflict is still there, and so my ideal, and this is still something we're working with and are developing, more tools and especially support systems for teams to sort of navigate, like, well, what happens when a conflict gets brought up? What happens when somebody posts in the Discord, like, I only got 10 give and I should have got 50. Um, how do you navigate that conversation with it? Could be like, oh my gosh, we're so sorry. We didn't realize you did that thing and overlooked. Or, how do you have that conversation that, hey man, this thing that you're doing that you think is so valuable, like isn't as valuable as you think it is. Being able to navigate those conversations is in some ways like the best predictor for success of a team.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really powerful to distribute the responsibility and opportunity to be HR to everyone. A lot of the engineers I know just don't have the social skills, the empathy skills to do conflict resolution and to listen and to not get heated. And so I think that there's an opportunity there in distributing those skills and building those skills, but it's also a risk too. So it's interesting to hear you reflect on this, because Coordinape is kind of where a lot of these things will come up. And y'all are doing this at scale. If I recall, you're in tens or hundreds of DAOs, so you've seen probably a lot of this.
Yeah, we still have dozens for sure of DAOs that are regular users, and also
Mm-hmm.
several. Um, we're seeing more and more, kind of, I would call them pop-up teams. Um, there's some pretty interesting use cases around, and emerging around hackathons, using Coordinape, so the hackathon teams can allocate to each other and take those results on record, or on chain rather. Um, but yeah, one of the interest areas of mine to grow Coordinape the most is looking at like, how do we support more of this, like, um, team and cultural development through this tool, because I think that's where a lot of teams actually have the highest kind of upside to grow into. Most
Mm-hmm.
teams don't get beat by technical challenges; they get beat by interpersonal and social
Cultural,
ones.
yeah.
So yeah, how can we support those? I think is, something I'm really keen to continue to dive deeper into.
I'm wondering if you have any reactions to the theme of Greenpill Season 4, which is all about capital allocation. Basically, the hypothesis is the way we do capital allocation off chain will be changed and hopefully be made better when we move it on chain, more democratic, more transparent, more scalable, more precise, less intermediaries. You know, is there anything within that hypothesis that you want to react to, especially Coordinape's place in that?
Um, I mean, I think I just want to I just want to cheer it on. I mean, I think the dream of sort of Web3 and crypto more broadly is this ability to more efficiently allocate capital, and the idea that you can spin up a team, spin up a wallet with an idea, and crowdsource that's or spin up a safe and be like, hey, here's our idea, here's what we're going to do. Somebody likes that and gives you a grant for it, and then you can work on it, and then through Coordinape, reward directly all of those people who actually did the work to do the thing, and those sort of capital flow throughs without a lot of the sort of painful cruft of filling out W-9s and getting everybody paid in this way, and contracts and stuff like that you can really just say, here's the idea,
Mm,
and then whoever wants to contribute to it can, um, and the tokens just can flow directly. That's the other thing that I think is really cool about Coordinape. We do have a vaults product, and some of the teams that have used that, it's cool to see, like, hey, this project, here's the budget, and you can see it on chain.
mhm,
And so the work that you do for it, then, like, it's going to get distributed according to this way.
mhm,
So again, it's just like, it's the rules of the game being clear and transparent and immutable, before people get started, I think relieves a lot of the pain of having to trust and make agreements and get clear. Like, well, what if this happens? Like, oh no, it's like, this is going to get paid out according to this, so you can really focus on doing the work.
yeah, I think it's really sort of interesting to see all the different capital allocation mechanisms, ecology growing up together. What's in my mind right now is that there's capital allocation mechanisms that start with the pool of money and then figure out how to distribute it, and then there's also capital allocation mechanisms that start with the registry and work backwards from the registry first. So I would put like Coordinape and Protocol Guild sort of in the same sort of category of starting with the registry. Protocol
Mm-hmm.
Guild is a self-curating registry that updates itself, and allows you to like weight contributors who are on the list. And Coordinape circles are kind of like the registry deciding its own weight.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they'll be, if the registries are bottom up and the things that start with the pools of money are top down, I feel like there's like a meeting in the middle at scale of the whole Ethereum ecosystem as the ecosystem sort of starts to self define around how
Mm-hmm.
it allocates capital. So,
Mm-hmm. And
yeah, I don't know if you have any reactions to that, but that was just what's in my mind's eye as you were speaking.
well, I think the part that I'm increasingly keen for Coordinape to play as well is like we were saying before, is not necessarily even as much the financial capital as
Hmm.
the reputational capital, and the fact that you can
Mm,
really take those contributions on chain, so that, if for example I was contributing at Protocol Guild, it's one thing to say, like, oh, I was a contributor there, and it's another thing to say, look, I was a part of 14 epics and I got over 2,000 give. you know um like, you can see that, and the assumption is, I must have been like a good collaborator, like I was actually contributing value there as attested by my peers, not as attested by, like, my tenure there, or by a single manager or something. So it's a much more like high signal way to build reputation and build credibility in the space, um, when you can take that reputation, and then it's also portable, with you, so it doesn't just live in the organization. Everyone knows, oh, you were amazing to work with or hard to work with. It's,
yeah.
that you take that with you everywhere you go, and can continue to build it. So that part of the transparency and composability, um, of capital allocation, I think, is really important too, as we think about all those different kinds of capital, not just financial.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Um,
Mhm.
I feel like we've sort of covered a lot of Coordinape stuff, and I'm tempted to go on to Colinks next. Is there anything else to say about Coordinape?
Um, no, I don't think so. I think we've covered the basics. It's really pretty straightforward. Now I think we can say it's retroactive public good funding for people. In a nutshell, that's kind of how it works.
Mhm,
And that, I just want people to understand that it's as much a cultural tool as it is a capital allocation tool, and that there's huge opportunity there. But
mhm.
yeah, happy to move on to colinks.
Okay. Well, now I'm gonna have to expand the scope of the season to cultural allocation, which is like a weird series of terms together. But I think the two can flow together, so it's all good. Yeah, tell us about Colinks.
So Colinks is a social network, and the basic idea is, can we kind of open up coordinate circles and instead create just a bigger network where people can allocate gives. So sort of looking at we were looking at LinkedIn and the sort of terrible system of endorsements there, and that anyone
Mhm,
can kind of post anything, and looking at how can we use Web3 as this way of building a trusted professional network, where endorsements actually mean something,
mhm,
but especially also that they're provable and portable as well. And so we created colinks. Again, that's you have a co-soul that is sort of your avatar in that system, and it you can post and share ideas, opportunities, etc. in colinks, and also you can allocate give to people for specific posts or for specific skills, and so really trying to build a sort of hopefully better LinkedIn, for the Web3 on chain set.
mhm. Yeah, I've got Colinks up in my browser. Listeners can get to it at colinks.coordinape.com. Looks like someone has been buying and selling my links, so it's kind of interesting to see that kind of mechanic in a professional network.
Yeah, we were trying to think of ways like how could we create a high signal network. The biggest problem with a lot of these platforms, certainly LinkedIn, is how do you maintain high signal when there's just all sorts of different posts, and the algorithm is going to feed you different things based on what that the company's goals, not necessarily yours. So we created a system, sort of borrowing the idea from Friendtech, that you can buy links and that they're on a curve. It turns out we flattened the curve quite a bit, but not nearly enough. And so we've got some ideas in the pipeline for how we can further make access to a lot more links to grow the network. We
Hmm.
find that it still gets a little bit too expensive for a lot of folks at the higher end after a lot of people's links get bought. Um, but the idea is that that's a way to really curate, and both get your ideas in front of people who you may not be able to in other networks,
Hmm.
and also, really have an audience that has crossed that frictional barrier of paying a couple bucks of optimism ETH in order to make the purchase. And so, we're looking for like a much more high signal cultivated and curated network. And our plan is to introduce, much more professional opportunities in colinks. So ways for people to do different job searches or exclusive job postings, as well as ways just to analyze your on-chain activity, POAPs, NFTs, etc., to find other people who may be weak ties in the network who you're not actually connected with yet.
Yeah. There's a whole category of, I guess I'll call it like casual capital allocation. It's basically for me is like low transaction cost, high number of transactions, capital allocation. So if you think about retroactive public goods funding or Gitcoin grants, you're basically moving like $10,000 or $100,000 at a time. But now that we've got blobs, which by the way, we're recording this on Dunkun Day, so happy Blob Day to you and to the audience. We're gonna have super cheap transactions, and so it's gonna enable a lot of like really emergent casual capital allocation that feels more like a
Hmm.
social network than a true, I don't know, traditional capital allocation tool. And Colinks feels like it's in that category for me, allowing me to just spend zero point zero 0.01 ETH at a time on buying your link and to give you give tokens. And yeah, I'll be curious to see what is successful in that category.
Yeah. Our main thing is that we really want people to be able to get giving and make on-chain attestations and endorsements in a way that's like easy and fun
Yeah.
and meaningful. Um, and yeah, we're planning some pretty cool integrations into Farcaster so that people will also be able to give directly within Farcaster, um, and just really trying to make that reputational and social signal attestation
Mhm.
more visible and more valuable for folks.
I'll be curious, now that there's more casual or emergent give circles, I'll be curious how the patterns of those differ from the people who have persistent working relationships in DAOs. You would think that people who are in the outer orbit or more casual relationships with each other will allocate give tokens, cultural capital, in different ways than people who are in the inner orbit from each other. It just feels like that makes sense intuitively, but to see that in the data would be cool.
Yeah, we're excited about a lot of the different kinds of visualization that we're going to be able to do as people start building their social networks through, essentially through these attestations of skills
Hmm.
and contributions with give. But yeah, there'll be and down the road, there's definitely a hope that these two things can kind of continue to grow together. Um,
Hmm.
I one of the dreams is that like people in colinks find each other and then can actually start a coordinate circle from right in there,
Hmm.
from right inside colinks. It's just like, hey, let's work on this project together. Let's do this thing together. We can spin up a project right here. So it's really kind of turning the LinkedIn idea on its head. Where you're there like trying to get a job within a company, where or instead you're just trying to find collaborators to spin up something, and you can start a company from within colinks. Start a DAO from within colinks.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that's the long term vision.
Would love to pivot the conversation towards your work in network states and your interest in network states. What are you doing with respect to network states, and what's interesting about it to you?
Um, I think similarly, I mean, what's interesting about it to me is I would just say similar to the interest in DAOs is just that
Hmm.
um, it offers the promise of sort of wholesale new systems as opposed to trying to tinker with and improve, the current systems. You kind of look around and see all these institutions being, kind of hopelessly broken, and the idea that you can somehow start fresh, I think, is always just like really really intriguing. The practicalities of that obviously are something else entirely. um,
Hmm.
but I think that organizing people around shared values and shared aspirations as opposed to geography just makes a ton of sense in the digital age. We're increasingly less bound by geography for a lot of things, and so like why not be able to organize more broadly um, in all sorts of ways, and how could we like potentially provision services to each other more effectively in some ways than the state does. Um,
Yeah.
so all that's really intriguing. And throughout before Coordinape, and then even during, we've hosted several events like DAO Camp and like Meta Camp, where we're basically bringing together leaders from around Web3 to really shift their context and be in the same place for a period of time. And I think experiments like those, like Zuzalu and like what the folks at Edge City are doing, the folks at Catman obviously have been leaders in this. I think for building the world's first network city. I think just more and more you're going to have these sort of pop up pop-up cities, pop-up towns, instantiations where people come together and form a community online, but then really IRL is where those bonds get solidified. Um, this I think it's really new, but it's really compelling to think about like what where that could lead,
Hmm.
where how people could start to provision, different kinds of services, different kinds of communities, when they start online and then instantiate in real life versus the other way around.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how many of these things that we're innovating in the DAO space can be ported to physical communities, which just have different trust assumptions, and you see
Hmm.
each other face to face a whole lot more IRL. So yeah,
Yeah,
I'd be curious about that.
yeah. I also just, I mean, I feel like whenever I'm at, any Web3 events, and I'd say especially within the Ethereum community, I mean, it there's very few people who I feel like would first identify like with their nationality. It feels like those identifications of the way people are like, oh, I feel like a lot of the people I meet much more are kind of world citizens and would identify themselves with through various online communities that they're a part of, a lot more than their nation state as a part of like a core part of their identity. Obviously, that's a
Hmm.
big generalization, but that just seems to be my feeling. And like the younger the generation that they're a part of, the more it sort of feels that way. And
Hmm.
I think that there's going to be increasing people that are born kind of digital first and spend so much of their lives in the metaverse. It's only natural that they're going to start to congregate and identify with those communities first and
Yeah.
foremost before their nation states.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that anecdote, but also to contrast that with, at least here in the United States, it feels like we're moving towards more of like away from the globalization of the 1990s and the 2000s into more of like a nationalistic, onshoring manufacturing and onshoring all these different supply chains and stuff. So it's interesting to compare and contrast those things. And I almost think of it as like a swirl between the network and the nation, as humanity, different subsections of humanity try to figure out where their communities of trust are and how they identify themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ultimate sort of instantiation of network states will probably be like watershed based bioregional, um, places of physical geography where people are
Yeah.
based, and then there'll be a network of those that you're a part of,
Hmm.
um, and and so there's a lot will happen online. People will find affinity groups and connections and sort of find like what are the right places for me, and then basically choose their membership in those kind of network states. Um, this is getting into kind of snow crash, far future territory, but that's what to me is exciting about them is the idea that you could actually, um, have 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 a state or a city or some place that you're a part of that's really formed through values, and shared ambition as opposed to just circumstance of where you were born.
Well, I think that we're getting towards the bottom of the hour. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to say, Zach?
I don't think so. I think we covered everything. I guess just that as we think about these network states, and the way that Coordinape plays into it, when you start thinking about how do you filter for all these people who are going to want to come be a part of your thing, um, and not just Coordinape, but all these sort of on-chain reputation primitives. I think they've been hard to get going because of the demand for on-chain reputation just isn't there yet. But I think it's going to be super important the way we allocate, um, reputation and trust,
Hmm.
um, going forward. And so I'm excited about a lot of the projects that are working right now to try to figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how you use the words allocate and trust and allocate reputation. And I feel like there's almost like a mirror of capital allocation that's dependent on the trust graph in the web of trust. And and reputation. And it makes me wish I had called this allocation season instead of capital allocation season, because it feels like when you take in the 8 forms of capital, it's broader than just capital, although capital mirrors a lot of these other
Hmm.
like trust and reputation allocation things.
Yeah, I mean, back to the question when you were saying, like what's exciting specifically about Web3 and allocating all these various forms of capital is the way that you can sort of program it. So you could
Mm,
say like, we're going to have streaming payments for people to do XYZ, but then there's multipliers for like how many people have you been endorsed by and how
yeah.
many grants have you given to, and so you can really start to identify and find and reward certain kinds of pro-social behavior,
Hmm.
or to sort of take a whole person into account, through their on-chain activity and attestations from others, um,
Hmm.
and that I think is really exciting to be able to start like actually incentivizing and rewarding the pro-social
Yeah.
social behavior we want to see.
Yeah. Well, hanging out with you and talking to you makes me feel like I'm at the frontier of this space. So thanks for giving us a piece of your mind. And for the audience, check out Coordinape and check out the Blue Pill, check out the Slaying Moloch podcast, and all those links will be in the show notes. Thanks so
Thanks
much,
a lot,
Zach.
Kevin. Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's great.
Peace. Alrighty, we just heard from Zach. I'm excited about him because about talking to him because I think that Coordinape is one of the frontier mechanisms in doing on-chain capital allocation. I think Zach is just so smart, so well-meaning, and experimenting at the intersection of theory and practice at the frontier. So always makes for good listening. Thanks again for listening to the GreenPilled.network podcast. Again, we're building a coordination, a network society of thousands of hackers, dreamers, and doers using crypto to bring positive sum digital systems to the world, like Zach, like Coordinape, like everyone who uses Coordinape gift circles or co-links. If you value our work, you can collect this episode. Go to pods.media/greenpill to find this episode and collect. And while you're at it, you might as well throw us a subscribe, like, or a review. Really helps our algorithmic overlords know that this is a movement that you want to build, and it helps us get Greenpill and Regen Crypto in front of more people. Thanks again for listening. Peace and love. See you on the next one.